So, after a big sip of tea, this week on our main topic here on Mastering Dungeons, we are going to continue looking at the Living Greyhawk as a tier. We now know, thanks to Gen Con, that Greyhawk is being offered in the Dungeon Master's Guide to sort of give an overview of how you might build a world for your own role-playing game, honoring the tradition of Greyhawk and also giving it as a blueprint for what you might do. So Teos and I are going through the Living Greyhawk Gazetteer, which was released in the year 2000 when third edition launched as a support system for the Living Greyhawk campaign, the organized play, Adventurers League, if you will, system for that time.
And it was hugely successful because of how people in all these different regions of the organized play campaign were able to take this book, breathe life into it, and do much more with it. And that's one of the reasons. Not only is this like the latest example, but it's also such a good example of the potential that can happen out of a setting like this. And one of the things that's neat to ponder is, what will the DM's guide, Dungeon Master's Guide, do to because it only has so many pages, right? The DMG 2014 is a full-size book, and now there's bigger font, more art, and somehow you got to cram in a campaign setting. So even if you take a few things out, there's only so much, but there's so many cool regions. And so how do you handle that? What would you take from these, and so on?
Right. And so in previous episodes, we've looked at the Living Greyhawk campaign. We've talked about the origins of the Greyhawk setting over the years, starting with its initial incarnations with all the way back to before first edition in OD&D, the original Dungeons and Dragons, and as part of Gary Gygax's home campaign, and the important players that made player characters that turned into NPCs within the campaign. We've slowly worked our way through then the book till we've got to the region section. And we did a deep dive into that region section for the first couple of regions, just to give sort of a holistic look at what's in each regional section, what needs to be there, what maybe doesn't need to be there.
Right.
But now we're going to go through a little quicker and just give some highlights from some of the regions as we go.
And you've got some great notes here about what one can look for in this kind of design.
Right. So my question is, what do you need to create adventures or a campaign? And how can these regions provide those things that you need? And I tried to let's distill this down to its essence.
Yeah.
If I'm going to sit down and write an adventure or create a campaign, what do I need? I need unstable or dangerous locations. I need something where the player characters can go in, get into trouble, and then get out of trouble. So what are some of these regions? It's called Dungeons and Dragons because dungeons were the first place for that to happen. These mysterious, magical, underground places where beings of great power reside. Then it became forests, and we got different types of adventures. Ruins. Then we get urban adventures with the unruly and dangerous city streets. So we're looking for those locations. Then we're looking for goals for characters to fulfill. We need them to fix the problems that good folk are having, or cause problems for the bad folks. And those are the two, for me, important things. When I sit down, I want to make sure my adventure has these things that are really easy to grasp.
Though I was struck, I was watching a great video on these Tales from the Infinite Staircase, and one of the fun things that was pointed out is how many of these are actually just like they're just like, go reclaim treasure, right? Go get treasure. And that has long been just a goal, right? Like Shadow Dark makes it its whole premise. Um, but I agree with you that for a setting, you can have some of that, and that can make individual locations stand out. But in general, for regions need larger problems where heroes are called to action, right?
Precisely. That's what I'm talking about here is what you need in a setting to
Yeah.
create these
Yeah.
adventures.
Even though your
Exactly.
adventure could be about get the loots from the Mad
Get
Tower.
the loot. And you still need unstable or dangerous locations. Otherwise, you just go into the bank and taking out a loan. Although dealing with loan managers may be just as dangerous. You got to be
Don't get me
careful.
started on the real world of it.
So for a lot of worlds and for a lot of adventures, the locations and troubles are not necessarily political in the sense of that word meaning power structures between nations. Uh, so it's not often that I've seen, especially in early adventures, but even recently, where you are talking with a leader of one nation against a leader of another nation,
True.
unless the power that's the other nation is like a demon or something truly evil, where two essentially normal political opponents are at odds.
Where I might step in and say that though Greyhawk is a little more like Lord of the Rings, where a trek across the land involves you coming into contact with people who go, why are you in my land? What's going on here? And you have to explain yourself, and they may have cares that line up or don't, right? Either because you're in the Elven forest, or you've stepped into Rohan's business, or and then those things get layered in, both your active quest, the cares of this group that you're in, right? Those things do matter more than I think in your typical Forgotten Realms campaign. You walk from one region to the other, and nothing's really telling you that this will be a problem. Here, the colors you fly are a problem, right?
And in that case, the unstable or dangerous location isn't unstable and dangerous necessarily as if you're jumping over an acid pit or dealing with a roper who is in the bottom of a pit trying to drag you in, but it's just navigating the cultural aspect of a new and unknown nation or
Yeah.
land.
Yeah.
But that's still a unstable and potentially dangerous location, and the goal is still the same. You're still trying to achieve whatever goal you were trying to do. Now you just have to figure out if by doing that you are fixing the problem for good folk, or if you're going to be causing problems for bad folk. And there is a little bit more shades of gray aspect to this, which some people love, right? Some people love this idea of we have to make a difficult choice because we are trying to do this good thing, but we may have to do bad things to do it, or we may need to make a deal with bad people to get this done. And again, some people are like, yes, give me that deep, dark, hard decision, and some people are like, I want to have a beer and I want to roll dice and I want to slay undead until I can't anymore, until I have to go home and wake up the next morning and go back to work. And both of those things are absolutely fine.
Totally.
You just need to know where your players fit on that scale.
Yep. And I think Greyhawk is a little more towards wanting you to engage with the levels beyond. I mean, not that obviously you can have it, but the way the setting is written suggests more of that grit and that, wait, who are you serving? What's going on? What are the politics between these nations? But if you, again, we've said this before, if you look at the adventures, a lot of times the adventures are still, we'll go into the dungeon, right? Like there was a battle of Emerity Meadows around the Temple of Elemental Evil, but you can also just go into the dungeon and kill the stuff. You can worry about why there was someone serving a particular god in the moat house, or just go kill some stuff. Up to you.
Right. But a lot of what we read in these regions is, this land is at odds with this land, and both of the leaders or both of the cultures or both of the political organizations are the same, or similar.
Similar.
So it does get into that, humanoid against humanoid on a larger scale, as opposed to you need to go into Fae and beat up on the liches
Yeah.
and their undead servants.
Well, and one of the interesting things that I found in the organized play campaign was when I visited various regions, the regions that were the most stable often had sounded like the coolest region to begin with, right? Like, oh, we're right by the city of Greyhawk. This will be so exciting. But then you realized that things were so cemented in place and stable that they didn't easily have these storylines they could throw that would really threaten everything. And so those regions often were the least fun. But the regions that had a lot in flux and a lot was unstable, those were the far more interesting regions to visit with, right? And even a place like Keelan that had a lot of power had a lot threatening its core and a lot of neighbor intricacies that made for great storytelling that helped it, right?
Except when I came on board, the amount of howling and outrage about how boring the adventures were in Keeland, because they were meant to be layered.
Yeah.
They were meant to be, there is this dark secret, i.e. Vecna, unknown force behind all of these things that are happening.
Right.
And people were like, I don't care. I want to go to Jeff and I want to
Fight giants,
bash giants and their kin, and have these wonderful, cheerful, huge battles. And I don't want to worry about this minutia. So the very first thing I did when I joined the Keelan Triad was start making adventures that didn't necessarily reveal those secrets, but were at least enjoyable and engaging just on an adventure level.
Yeah, and so that's a lens we can look at these regions through as well, is can you make cool, enjoyable adventures? Are there these seeds that help you go like, oh yeah, I know what I'm doing with this place?
Yep. So with that, let's dive in. So what we did here is we'll give a little background on the region, and then I just sort of threw in some lines or some concepts that were in the regional write-up that I thought were, yes, this is where, if I'm making a campaign or an adventure, this is how I use this region.
All right. So maybe I'll do the historical kind of bit here, and then you can add those quotes. So first up is Bissel, and this was Connecticut in the real world, and I used to drive up here a lot, and in fact, one time our table won being the Heroes of Bissel, which the locals did not like that people from the mid-Atlantic had come up and won this title.
As an aside, I have to make this aside, Teos. We had some discussions about living Greyhawk at Gen Con with some people that were involved back then. And, a huge part of the campaign was that people going to a different region to, quote unquote, affect the storyline for their own region, and how fun it was for some and how frustrating it was for others.
Well, I'll start with a criticism of this book, which I totally understand given the art budget they had. But when you look at like the 4th edition Forgotten Realms campaign guide and player's guide, one of the things they do that's really nice is they take that giant map and they'll give you a little snapshot picture of it. And as we said last episode, it's really kind of important to know, where is this place? And they don't do a proper job of that often. They just assume you know where this is and what's the borders and stuff. So Bissel is in the northern Sheldamar Valley, and the Sheldamar Valley is one of the important regions on the map. Bissel is at war with Ket to the north. They're repeatedly at war as it's placed between several mountain ranges, and thus groups from all over kind of want this access point that Bissel has between the Beclunish West, Sheldamar Valley kind of to the south, and the rest of the Flanness. The other bit of interesting history here is Everd the Necromancer of Everd's Black Tentacles was born in Bissel, was a noble there.
Yeah, and the takeaways I got from this, a few lines. A constant stream of caravans, messengers, and patrols moves along the country's 2 major highways. What that tells me is commerce is important here, and keeping commerce safe is important here. So if you like the old caravan duty trope, this is a good place to do that.
Mm.
Bissel's 4 famed mercenary border companies are being reorganized and retrained. So
Mm.
these were groups that were important, and they need to become important again. And what I wrote that was, you have to be careful about making the characters a part of something so ingrained in the region. So if you make the characters part of this new border company, one of these 4
Yeah.
border companies, you're sort of locking them in. Now, can you go outside of that? Sure, they could be a special elite unit that can go anywhere, but you're still limiting them a bit. One of the fun things about the Living Greyhawk campaign was you might have one member of a border company adventuring with one member of a merchant's guild and one member of a different region's
Yeah.
special
Military, right?
forces
Yeah.
unit,
Yeah.
and you could get some fun interplay between that. But it's just a small thing I've noticed over
Mm-hmm.
the course of many campaigns I've run or seen.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, Another quote: an attempted insurrection by necromancers in 580 CY. Remember, we are dealing with 591
Mm-hmm.
CY in this campaign. So 11 years earlier, possibly tied to the plight of the disgraced evil wizard lord known as Ivard, led to harsh suppression of fringe groups, and people were tried for treason, etc., etc., etc. I want to run a campaign in 580, right?
Yeah.
Because I want to stop this insurrection of necromancers.
Yeah.
I'm sad that it just happened,
Well, at
right?
least though, it gives you that a thing happened, right?
Yeah,
And I guess it
yeah,
was stopped. And honestly, that's fine too, because it tells you,
yeah.
one of the questions you can play with is, well, was it stopped?
Right,
How was
right.
it stopped, right? The at what cost
Yeah,
or by whom? Maybe it was faked that it was stopped, right? There are enough
yeah,
questions around this. I can work with this. And yeah, it's super exciting.
yeah,
But you're right. The
yeah.
more that a thing is happening versus
Mhm.
past tense, the
Right.
more useful it is to play off of
Yeah. And you said the next thing I was going to say, so that's perfect.
it.
And then they talked about the Thornword, which is a capital city. It was lost and made into a neutral city state
Yeah.
that was held in common by other nations: Cat, Valuna, the Grand March, and Bissel.
Oof.
All I could think of was, how cool would it be to set maybe not a full campaign, but some adventures here where you're
Yeah.
trying to navigate this city held by 4 different people that might have different rules in different sections, and you might have conflict between the forces that are in power. All of that sounds like fun.
Oh yeah. That sounds great. And really, whatever you like about a campaign, you could play off of this premise. Like if you want deep
Mhm.
politics stuff, hey, what could be more perfect than this? But also you could have just any kind of like, missions of different kinds sent by each of these agencies, right? There could be, if you're playing merchants and you're playing against all these different groups that are buying and selling, right? There's just so much that you could play off of regardless of what kind of campaign you want to run.
Yep. And while it might not be dangerous and unstable in the same way that a dungeon is dangerous and unstable, it definitely can be dangerous and
Oh yeah.
unstable. And the force that is blocking you from achieving your goal, which is the whole point of drama, which is the whole point
Yeah.
of conflict and storytelling, etc.
Yeah.
So Bissell, I didn't play. I might have played like one adventure from Bissell, so I can't remember the
Oh, I
the
played a
uh,
ton. Yeah, there
region.
was a lot. They varied in what they dealt with, but a lot of Ket, a lot of Everd, right? Those are big themes. A lot of this
Right.
kind of trying to hold on to your political power for sure.
Yeah. The next region they talk about is Blackmoor, which is very interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Why? Because Blackmoor was actually Dave Arneson's campaign that was grabbed and shoehorned into Greyhawk. Uh, so it has a very different feel. It has strange magic, often seeming to be mechanical in nature, but actually is from a crashed spaceship. So sort of Barrier Peaks feeling.
Mm-hmm.
What do you remember about this
Yeah, I
place,
mean,
Teos?
the eventually Dave Arneson was actually asked to write the City of the Gods kind of adventure slash supplement, which can be found here. There were a couple of supplements that dealt with this. Blackmoor is all the way to the north, except for the region beyond that, which is this mysterious black ice area. But it's otherwise kind of kept out of the immediate, usually you're not thinking about this region unless you want to, kind of thing. And it's because I think it has that magical side to, or futuristic side to it, that the locals don't really know what's going on, but you can easily find it. There is Blackmoor Castle and Blackmoor Town, and the town is in ruins. Blackmoor Castle is the famed place where Dave Arneson's games would take place. And there's an orc king that holds court at the castle who says that he serves, or they serve, Egg of Coot, who is the great name for the ruler that comes from this strange otherworld place. And it's just really, really bizarre place that is offered. If you want to go in this direction, you've got a whole region where you can dig into this kind of play.
For sure. And it's strangely enough, or maybe not strangely enough, because of the third edition D20 boom, Dave Arneson started a company that created Blackmoor content. And they actually had published books and their own organized play campaign after a certain amount. And I played a couple of adventures in that. So that was interesting. And now when I read something like this, I'm like, oh, this is where I want to set at least part of a campaign, if not the full campaign, because you've got this dangerous place. It's mysterious and ruined, and there's strange things that happened before and strange things happening now. And there's this orc king that sets up in this castle, and you've got to get through the town to maybe recapture some of the town and set up a base and bring in people and then go up and deal with the orc in the castle. But there's other strange things going on. And what's the Egg of Coot? And then I realized, this was 25 years ago, and it was made even before that. And a lot of these things have become the foundation, have become the tropes for other things. And then I was thinking, I've got a book sitting right here that I can't wait to dig into and play. It's called Dungeons of Drakkenheim. And it is a city that was ruled by this family, and then a meteor hit and all of this stuff. And now there's factions, and you have to go into the city. And it's so everything old is new. But this was like an original. So that's pretty cool.
I can't read about the Land of Black Ice, which I think is in the geography section, not in this regional section. But I mean, to me, knowing how George R. R. Martin played like champions for many years and things like that, he's a total gamer. It wouldn't shock me if Land of Black Ice was an influence, because when you read it, it gives you those kinds of vibes. Absolutely.
Yeah, and I created a few core adventures for Living Greyhawk in the Land of Black Ice. It was a lot of fun to sort of play with that mysterious stuff. But let's get to the next region in the book, called the Bone March. And as you might expect from a Bone March, that is a dangerous place because of the quote-unquote inhuman tribes there, the orcs, the gnolls, the ogres, etc. They're generally not cooperating with one another, but when they do, they threaten the north.
Yeah, and the concept is that the ruler is presumed dead, some human that was causing something. So where are they?
Right. Yeah, and this is one of those things where when I read, they have the sections, and so I flipped to ruler, and I was thinking it might give some of the rulers of these humanoids, but it's like, no, the ruler that was there before was this pious, right? Before he was killed or disappeared. I'm like, oh, let me create adventures here. This ruler, something's got to be up. If they haven't found the body in any story, that means there's a chance they're still alive. And we can do something with that. So, this is a place where everything's there that I need to create adventures in. You've got lots of threats. You've got a hope that maybe someday it will be reclaimed and the rightful and legitimate powers restored.
It'd be a great region to set a campaign where everybody plays like not humans, elves, dwarves, right? You play orc, hobgoblin, bugbear, like those kinds of characters. That'd be great.
So tell me about the Bright Lands, Teos.
Well, the Bright Lands, this is a desert, so aptly named. After Rary the Trader attacks the Circle of Eight, he heads, which we talked about a couple episodes ago, he takes over the desert people of the Bright Lands, subjugates all of them except basically the centaurs, who are able to continue to oppose him. And there are some interesting creatures out there. There are like the half human, half scorpions are out there and things like that. And Rary builds a magical tower in the desert, and he is searching for something with his friend Robilar. And they there's some item of power that he seeks, and maybe there are ruins underneath the magical tower. There was a whole thread on this that you could play a series of adventures for this as part of the Living Greyhawk campaign. And it's a little, I found the section a little confusing as to what exactly it's almost like written in a way that you can't touch instead of the opposite, right? Making it easy to use. But there are cool ideas here. Deserts, dangers. He's subjugated most of the people, but not everybody. The centaurs are there as a sort of source of tension. And the idea is, well, of course, if he finds what he's looking for, bad, but also he's got enough of a stranglehold in this region that he could attack other regions. Why is he doing this? And there's even some comments here about like some members of the Circle of Eight refuse to believe that he truly is against everybody, even though he killed a couple of them.
It was all a big misunderstanding, apparently.
Let's not bicker over who killed whom.
Right. It's supposed to be a happy occasion. Yeah, but even with that, you can work with that, right?
Mm-hmm.
Maybe there was a longer term vision.
Yeah.
That Rary knew they would bring back the circle, but in order for a bigger thing, you can play with those sorts of things. The first two paragraphs of the overview are just perfect. It's like, here is this environment that's everything I want. It is unstable. It is contested. It is mysterious. There are some goals that characters may have to enter this place. So let's get some adventures there. And what I want, Teos, when we make our inevitable Pharaoh campaign, or maybe evitable, I don't know, we put it there and we tie it all to Rary in some way.
That's great. That's great. Well, yeah, especially if you take the original premise of the stars of Mopalar, and you could that could be what Rary is seeking, and maybe the wishes are more powerful than any normal wish, and there's a lot you could work with there. Yeah,
for sure. Sure. How about Celene, Teos?
So Celene is the idea that it is kind of very Lords of the Rings. This is the domain that the elves have retreated to. Elves once ruled most of this land. They diminished long before the human migrations, and then retreated further as humans began to enter these areas. And this is the principal elven nation. Celene is ruled by Queen Yolande, who is of fairy lineage. She distinguished herself in battles, but through those battles came to turn herself against war. She now feels like no more elven lives should be lost, and not a lot of people know this. What they do know is that Celene has isolated itself from other lands, not helping even borderlands when they are in need, whereas once they were the stalwart defenders and fighting for good. So it's this question of what will Celene do in the future? Will any elves pressure against the queen because the queen is so highly regarded? But it's a little staticky in that sense of like it is withdrawn. Unclear what takes you out of that.
And so there's two things here. When I see border dispute in an RPG region, I sort of go, oh no. Because while it sounds exciting maybe for some, it's that old humanoid versus humanoid, right? It's not it may be unstable, but it's not unstable in a satisfactory, we need to defend this sort of thing, unless the border dispute is with like a dragon or a beholder nation or something. And the second is one of these places that are sort of not evil, but standoffish can be hard to make interesting, because what you do is you go in and you say, we are heroes and we are going to help you. And they're like, no,
we don't talk to you.
Or B, we are heroes and we need your help. And they're like, no.
Yeah.
And it can be fun in that old role-playing trope of you must convince the leader to
Sure.
help
Yeah.
your
Yeah.
cause. But then we all know how hard that can be
Yeah.
with, is it all tied to one check, or is there a series of things you must do? And if you end up spending 4 levels trying to earn the help of this nation, then are you really doing it, or is the nation the one solving the problem?
Yeah.
So
This
you
one,
just have to be careful with that.
I'm remembering that the plot hook that they had, or character backstory hook they had for the Critical Role playing game for Daggerheart, where there was that sort of, you've been thrown out of this, you had to leave this kingdom, right? That's where this could work. Is if your backstory is, I was thrown out of Celene, I am, second to the throne after the queen, and you have to go back for some reason, right? But possibly that's your head if you return, or something along those lines. But you have to go back and have this resolve both your backstory and appeal for help. Then it could be more interesting, right? But this is a place to visit, and I think not a place to stay in for too long.
For sure. How about Dyvers then?
Well, this is the multicultural city and port that is the envy of all. I mean, even I think Greyhawk looks to Dyvers, because what Dyvers does differently is basically discard a lot of the rules that other regions have to abide by. And in fact, its history is one of splitting off from Furyandi to become independent and ruled by merchants, and kind of get away from the oversight and rules. It is along the Velverdaiva River and the Near-Div Lake. That lake is sort of like Neverwinter of the Forgotten Realms, does not freeze, so you have year-round shipping. Dyvers is a place you go to when you want to not be found by the people who are looking for you. You need to start over. There's a strong criminal element active in this city. What else, Shawn?
For Forgotten Realms fans, Dyvers has that Baldur's Gate sort of feel to it. It's a city, and it's populated, and it's mercantilely important. But like Teos said, it's got that scum and villainy feel to it.
Yeah, for sure.
Which is great. And could you run a full campaign there? Yeah.
Sure. Yeah.
But for me, it's a great place to visit, but I wouldn't want a whole campaign there. I would want this to be one of those places where you are searching for someone, and that they likely, after escaping the authorities, went to Dyvers. And so now you're going to have an adventure or 2 or 3 moving through this place, and hopefully achieving your goal, because it is dangerous and unstable in a completely different way.
Yeah. Yeah. And Dyvers was one of the regions in Living Greyhawk. I did not visit it. I think maybe once. But if I were to run with a part of the world that feels a little bit like this, I think I would go for the Bandit Kingdoms instead, because to me, that idea that we talked about last episode of Ayus threatening the place, and the sort of evil versus, do you turn towards the path of good as a group when you've been nothing but rogues, but now you're so heavily seeing the price of evil? That to me would be a more interesting story than Dyvers, because it's just sort of mercantile, that kind of merchant thing. Right. You want a little more going on than just, we're, in it for the coin, in my opinion.
For me, this is where this would be the perfect place for that old background system, where you get that feature like you are the part of the Thieves Guild, and you can find a place, and that's where this sort of thing, a little more role playing heavy, as opposed. I totally agree with you about going to Bandit Kingdoms, but I could see some fun being had here, especially if your players like that sort of role play. Let's do one more region, and then we will Vamonos, and that is Ekbir.
So this is a caliphate. So that is the term used. Located along the Dramage Ocean, devoted to Al-Akbar and some other Bakloonish deities like Istis. This is your most Bakloonish of the regions out there, and captures that real, Middle Eastern feel that is sort of the trope that's behind the Bakloonish Empire. Ekbir is one of the oldest Bakloonish states, with the capital having been founded by Al-Akbar himself. And I forget, is Al-Akbar a god or a demigod?
A god.
God, okay,
ascended to godhood.
Yeah. And so he was immortal when he founded Ekbir. This is a benevolent and ordered kingdom with many clerics traveling to other troubled regions. And again, it's neat that, even back in this Gygax era, which has a number of issues and these tropes, the tropes aren't always like you might expect them to be negative. But in this is a place that was so firmly established and doing so well that they were the ones helping everybody else in the area, right? Very strong fleet and army, but the big thing that happened is the loss of the Cup and Talisman of Al Akbar, these artifact set, and then raids by nomads, both of which these things are in early adventures, have eroded the stability and resulted in Tuzmit and Zaif being independent and threats upon Ekbir itself. And so it's no longer this sort of super stable, perfect place. It's threatened from all sides again.
And this is where my curiosity really kicks in.
Yeah.
Because before we've been toying with cultures and with different things. This is a religion now that we are really, really getting into, right? And that's a whole other level.
Sure.
Not for better or worse, just a different level.
Yeah, it's a different type of campaign story that you're telling when you've got this kind of
and a different connection to our real world.
Yeah.
And so I'm wondering, what do cultural consultants say about this? Are we going to see a god called Al Akbar? Are we going to see Caliphate and these terms used? This is the first time we've really gotten into this backloonish Middle East. Yeah. It's been hinted at, but when you see these particular words used, that is a whole other level.
Right.
And so I am like, this is one of the things on my like top 3 questions about what's going into this Greyhawk setting is, how are we going to handle this?
Yeah. Do they even address that there are Bakloonish and that there are Sul and right Oridians and Flan, and how do you decide how to define them? It's difficult. Yeah, I've said before, I'm of split mind on this, but in general, I don't mind using real world counterparts. I think it can be very useful as a concept. I mean, in some ways, we're always playing as a default in Europe. That's not like we're just sticking to the default. In some ways, means that you're European, and that can be boring when you're just that. So it can be fun and I don't mind seeing some aspects of my life and my childhood brought into stories, but I can also see why some folks don't like it and why cultural consultants would argue against it. It was interesting to see in the Pharaoh adventure, they made some changes, including like renaming the Pharaoh. And I actually have a lot of questions that I'd love to ask Justice about the changes that were made to try to myself learn from them to see kind of how they approach this. Which is always difficult and imperfect. I mean, I remember reading recently that the Oriental Adventures, much maligned book, there were boxes and boxes of materials they gathered on research trying to build this, right? So the intention was there, but what is a cultural consultant going to advise at the end? And
that is a question I cannot wait to see the answer to. But we have more regions to cover, and we will do so next time. The Frost Barbarians, they're going to have to wait.
All right. Well, including my favorite region.
That's right. So guess who doesn't have to wait? The patrons. The patrons don't have to wait. And so thank you to all the patrons. My voice is almost gone. So I'm going to do something different here, Teos. I'm going to let you read the... You think you can do it?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
All right. And I learned how to say Krishna's last name after 5 minutes of a Henry Higgins type thing. It's Krishna Sea Monster. That's yeah.
Well, Dutch is subtle in that way, and I mean,
yes,
they were sea people, so
yeah.
Podcast people. I'm shaking my head and making clear that's my joke. Thank you, Master of Realms supporters. Thank you to the Masters of the Multiverse, who we give our special shout out. Most of your names will now be butchered in a new way. Keith Aman of The Monsters Know What They're Doing, Lou Anders of Lazy Wolf Studios, Craig Bailey, David Bastianson. Oh, Shawn's dancing. I can see it out of the corner of my eye. Steve Bissonette, Merrick Blackman, Calvin Bridges Avalos, Evil John, Will Doyle, Andy Edmonds at nerdonomicon.com, The Mighty Jerd, James Fisher, Ben Heisler and Paige Laitman, Sean Hurst, Brian King, Jim Klinger, aka DM Prime Mover, Chad Lynch, Paul Mata, The Mathemagician, Eric Mengi, Trey McElmore, John Mickey, Sean Molly, Falcon Neal, Tom Nelson of the Deck of Player Safety, Mike Olson, The Mighty Zeus, Host Fiction RPG Audio, Robert Pazley, Vladimir Prenner from Croatia, it's the names, Pugnus, Ozymandias Rex, Chance Russo at Drago Russo, Ross Sandberg, Andy Shockney, Krishna, what was it you said it was? Sea Monster. Josh and Lewanica of the Tabletop Journeys podcast, Jeremy Taluman from the D&D TV podcast, Tres, Joe Tyler, Marcelo de Velasquez, James Walton, Graham Ward, Jason Ward from Accidental Cyclop Games, Javier Wasiak, Chris Webster, and Walt Winfrey. Thank you all. If you love this show like we do, please consider supporting the Patreon at patreon.com/masteringdnd. Leave us reviews on the podcast, thumbs up, notifications, all that on the YouTubes. We really appreciate it. And you can find me at alphastream.org. Shawn, where are you?
I am at Shawn Merwin on most of the social media places. We are at Mastering Dungeons on those same places. Or just go to our YouTube channel, which is youtube.com/@Mastering
Mm-hmm.
So, Teos, here we are.
Yeah.
What are we going to do now?
I'm going to start my all-elf campaign where quests are offered and you say no. All the players say no to every quest that's offered.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I don't even know where I am at this point, much less what I'm going to do in the future. So we'll just leave it at that.
All right. Well, good. I'm excited for that.
Mm-hmm.